Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. When I was a lad, the 5th of November meant only one thing, it was firework night. But this year, the 5th of November means something quite different as we enter a second lockdown. And I don't know about you, but it all feels very heavy to me. I'm sort of slightly dreading it, particularly when it's winter and it's getting dark at night. I find it oppressive. But with the rising tide of infections and the number of hospitalisations, I think it's really important that we look after our NHS, particularly here in the southwest. So I hope and pray that through this lockdown we can arrest the spread of the virus, because that's so important. Above all, we mustn't be driven by either fear or exhaustion. One of the things that we learnt in the spring, in the first lockdown, is the importance of going deep into the well springs of our faith, to pray and to renew our trust in God. And when we do that, and when we reach out to those around us in need, then actually the rough edges of this lockdown and isolation, but they're sort of smoothed over. And that's so important if we're going to get through this in one piece and to be ready to celebrate Christmas. As St. Paul says when he wrote to the Romans, we should rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, and we should persevere in prayer. Today, as well as going into this lockdown, the archbishops have invited us to pray for our nation. There's a great call to prayer, ideally at 6 o'clock every evening, and if possible for the bells to ring just as the cathedral bells are ringing now. But actually you can pray anywhere at any time. Just beam up an arrow to God, praying for our fantastic NHS, praying for our doctors, our nurses, those in care homes, praying for those who are vulnerable and isolated in our community, praying for local businesses, because so many people are frightened of their livelihoods and are really concerned about the vulnerability that they face during this lockdown. One of the writers that have really inspired me in my own discipleship is Julian of Norwich and her little book, Revelations of Divine Love. She lived in the Middle Ages in Norwich, and actually we don't know her real name. She's called the Lady Julian because she lived in a house right next door to St. Julian's Church. And if you ever go to Norwich today, you can go to the church and you can still see the little house where she lived right up against the church. She lived at a time when hundreds, thousands of people right across Europe were dying of the bubonic plague, and there was fear and there was anxiety around, and she had a great sense of revelation of God's love for us. And she went out one day, and as she was going there, she saw a little hazelnut, and she picked it up just as actually the squirrels are here in my garden, picking up the nuts and squirreling them away for winter. And it spoke to her of how God's love has created it and sustained it and won't let it go. And it reminded her of that marvellous text at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, "The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms." That God holds each of us in the palm of his hand and won't let us go. And right at the end of her book, she wrote words which have actually come down to us through the ages. She said, "And all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." If you like, it's hazelnut theology. So as we go into this second lockdown, I offer you this as a symbol that you should know that God holds you in the palm of his hand, and he won't let you go.